all trying to make sense of this market. We're going to hear from the Fed and what they're actually thinking at 2 p.m. Today. I know a lot of folks are focused on that and inflation. What are you focused on?
Well, we certainly focused on the long term first and foremost as a pension plan. But, you know, the structure within the markets, we think essentially that the Feds are getting some credit for the way that they've managed this to date. We did last November change we're in the process of implementing the new strategic asset allocation for the $500 billion portfolio that puts in a little more inflation protection. We certainly have some downside risk protection on our factor-weighted equities, which is about half the portfolio. But, you know, we're long-term investors. We're going to pay attention to the short run, but we're much more concerned if inflation were to stay at the rates. We know the Feds are working very diligently to try to control inflation. And again, long-term investors, we stay focused.
In terms, though, of how you're thinking about allocation, broadly speaking, both in the context of a lot of folks thinking about tech, but also how you're thinking about private equity venture, is any of this change as you start to look out over the next several years and think, I imagine, that we're going to be seeing meaningful inflation across the board?
It has. We actually increased our allocation to both real assets, infrastructure, as well as private equity, moving private equity up from 8% of the portfolio to 13% of the portfolio. Obviously, we'll have a bit of time to implement that strategy through our pacing model. But really, on the real asset side, increasing that also into double digits as a way of having some inflation protection in the portfolio itself.
Is there any thesis that you have about an impending recession? I mention this because Deutsche Bank out with a note today saying they're expecting a recession by the end of the year. Stocks perhaps down as much as 20%. Goldman Sachs has also been talking about the possibility of a recession. There's some that are moving money, I know, into private equity now because they think there's going to be an opportunity on the other side if, in fact, this bad news proves true and therefore becomes good news if you're maybe trying to pick up some stuff on the cheap later.
No, I mean, we stay committed to our long-term strategy. And again, the asset allocation on the private equity side, we've always had a pretty significant target to private assets, including a new allocation to private debt. Again, it's about diversifying the portfolio to withstand, the various market conditions that we find ourselves in over decades. But we do think the position of the portfolio today is postured in a way that can withstand, some volatility over the next, 4 years.